Do you know how Maledict works? But not really. You probably know that it can do lots of burst damage, but understanding how that burst damage is calculated can help you maximize Maledict's effectiveness. And let me tell you, it can get a little confusing.
I don't think so.
Especially because it doesn't always work as intended. But that's okay. Today we're going to clear this up and learn how Witch Doctor's Maledict actually works. Maledict has a 12-second duration, doing a set amount of damage every second. We'll refer to this as the base damage. Every 4 seconds after Maledict is cast, it can also do a burst of damage, which is probably the one you notice the most and where the real power of Maledict comes from. The amount of burst damage is based on the difference between the unit's health when Maledict was applied and their current health. So if you deal a lot of damage to a unit with Maledict on them, they'll take a lot of burst damage. Maledict's burst damage does not care about how much total damage the unit has taken. It only cares about the difference between their starting health when Maledict was applied and their current health right before the burst damage is applied. So if the affected unit took 1000 damage but then healed for 990, they take very little damage from Maledict's burst damage since the difference in health was only 10. But there's something about this burst damage that doesn't always work as intended. There are 3 bursts of damage that occur over the 12-second duration of Maledict, every 4 seconds after being applied. The way Maledict's damage is supposed to work is like this. Maledict is applied, starts dealing the base damage instances every second, and 0.1 second after each 4th base damage instance, the burst damage is supposed to be applied. But that's not always the case. Sometimes the burst damage comes after the 4th base damage instance. This doesn't sound like a big deal, but it actually can have a potentially noticeable impact due to how the burst damage is calculated. Let's say this Pudge has 3000 health, and Witch Doctor uses a level 4 Maledict on him. Maledict checks the unit's current health 4 times over the 12-second duration, once as the curse is applied, and again every 4 seconds after. On the first check, Maledict takes note of Pudge's starting health, 3000. 4 seconds after the curse is applied, Maledict makes another check, but this time to see the difference between Pudge's starting and current health. Let's say Pudge took 1000 damage in this first window of time between the first and second check. The calculation for how much burst damage Pudge is about to take would go like this. The difference between Pudge's starting and current health is 1000. Maledict is level 4, so the current health loss as damage is 40%. So we take 40% of 1000, which is 400, and that's the burst damage that Pudge will take. Now, this is simplified to not take into account magic resistance, but if we did, we'd simply apply that to the 400 value. Then the same thing would happen for the next 2 checks at 8 and 12 seconds. Maledict will again check the difference between Pudge's health at the start of Maledict and his current health, take 40% of that difference and apply it as burst damage. So now that we know how the damage is calculated, how does that affect the inconsistency we mentioned earlier with the burst damage instance applying later than expected? This matters slightly because when the burst damage is about to be applied, Maledict will check the unit's difference in health. So if the spell is doing that calculation after another damage instance, that means the difference in health is larger, resulting in a higher burst damage being dealt than what it should be. As for the strategy behind this, well, there doesn't seem to be much. Maybe it's a server tick thing, maybe it's Gaben granting you more damage based on your compendium level, or maybe it's just a straight up bug from our favorite indie developers. But I actually did some digging, and in the source code I found it says that if you subscribe to my channel, you'll always be granted more burst damage from Maledict. I'm serious, go try it out for yourself. Now let's touch on how to best use Maledict to maximize its effectiveness. The best way to use Maledict is to deal more damage early on. This is because before every burst of damage, it'll check the unit's difference in health. If you deal a lot of damage in the first window, it'll deal a lot of burst damage, which means when the second check comes around, the unit's difference in health will be higher, resulting in an even larger burst of damage, and the same applies for the following bursts. So use Maledict and deal as much damage as you can in the first 4 seconds before the first burst of damage. If a unit gets affected by Maledict but then heals to over their starting health when the curse was applied, the unit won't take any burst damage at all. They'll still take the base damage every second, but the burst damage instances will not even exist. And you know what's even crazier than how Maledict works? It's how Witch Doctor's Death Ward actually works. I made a video going over the mechanics of that, like where to place it so you deal the most damage possible, so be sure to check it out. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you learned something new with me.